Hey, so what we're going to do today is we're going to take up the trigonometry unit test. All right? So the first page was all about choosing the right method. Okay? So in this first question, right, first we see it's not a right angle triangle. Okay, so that means SOHCAHTOA and Pythagorean theorem are useless. And then we try to decide if we want to use sine law or cosine law. Well, sine law we can use if we have a pair of corresponding angle and side. In this case, we don't. There's an angle, no side, side, no angle, and side, no angle. So that means this has to be cosine law, right? And then the last question is, are we using the cosine law for sides or for angles? Well, we're trying to figure out a side, so it has to be the cosine law for sides. So that means E is the correct answer. Okay? The next one, again, not a right angle triangle. So we look for pairs. Well, in this case, I have a pair. There's 45 and the corresponding side is 13. So this is going to be sine law. Okay? So I'm going to use the sine law. And the question is for sides or angles. Well, I'm trying to find an angle. So this has to be sine law for angles. Right? So sine law for angles is D. All right, next one. Again, not a right angle triangle. Right? So we look and we see if we have a pair. Well, there's an angle, but no side. Here there's an angle, oh, and there's a side, right? So that means we can use the sine law. And in this case, I'm trying to find a side, so I'm using the sine law for sides. So that's C. This one is a right angle triangle, so that means it's either Pythagorean theorem or SOHCAHTOA. Well, I have an angle involved too, and Pythagorean theorem doesn't let me use angles, so this has to be SOHCAHTOA. This one, not a right angle triangle, so it's either sine or cosine law. A pair, well, there's a side, no angle, side, no angle, side, no angle. So there is no pair, so not the sine law. So we're left with the cosine law, and we're trying to find an angle. So that means cosine law for angles. And finally, this is a right angle triangle, so it's either SOHCAHTOA or Pythagorean theorem, and in this case, there is no angles involved, so I'm using Pythagorean theorem. Okay, so that's that for that page. Now, number 7 says, select the correct formula and solve for the missing angle. Okay, so right away, since we're using a formula for a missing angle, I know that this is not it because that's got sides on the top. And I know that this is not it because that's the cosine law for sides. Okay? So we're using either the sine law for angles or the cosine law for angles. Well, now the next thing I do is I need to look for a pair. Well, here's 34 and 13. That's a pair. So I know that I'm going to use the sine law for angles. All right. So the next thing I need to do is I need to write out the sine law for angles. So I'll write it out. Sine A over A is sine B over B is sine C over C. Okay? And now I need to label the rest of this triangle. So if that's capital A, this is little a. B, it doesn't matter which one I call B. So let's call that one B, which will make that little b. And I'll call that C and little c. Now notice that C and little c I don't know. So I'll get rid of that part. And now I'll rewrite everything here with what I know. So capital A, I don't know. So I'll leave that alone. So sine A. Little a is 15. Sine B is sine 34. And little b is 13. Okay? So now what I can do is I can figure this out in my calculator. Okay? So that means I'll rewrite it again. Let's go over here and rewrite it. So I have sine A over 15 is equal to, and now I can just put in sine 34, and the answer is 0.56 over 13. Okay? So that means now I have to get rid of this 15, right? So I'll cross multiply. So sine A is equal to, and now I'll do 15 times 0.56 divided by 13. So 15 times 0.56 divided by 13. And I get 0.75. And then finally, remember, if I have sine of an angle is 0.75, the last thing I have to do is sine inverse. So A is sine inverse, 0.75. So here, if I go second sine inverse, second sine inverse 0.75, I get 48.56 degrees, which is 49 degrees. Okay, so that's how we do that. All right, now let's look at the next one. Well, you draw the diagram, and now you want to select the formula and calculate the width of the hole, right? So here's the pothole, right? And I want to select the formula. So first of all, it's a length. So in this case, the angle formulas are out. And do I have a pair? Well, 22, no side, 16, no angle, and 18, no angle. So that means I can't use sine law. So I want to use the cosine law. So I just want to write out a squared is equal to b squared, which is 18, c squared minus 2bc cos a, right? Okay, now what I want to do is I want to do this whole thing in my calculator all at once, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to literally type in everything all at once, okay? So 18 squared plus 16 squared minus 2 times 18 times 16 times cos 22, and my answer is 45.9. So 45.9, but that's a squared, okay? So remember, to get rid of that square, I have to square root both sides. So that means a is the square root of 45, which I can find by going second square root 45.9, and we get 6.8 meters. Okay, so the width across the pothole is 6.8 meters. All right. And the last one is you're trying to measure the height of a historic building, and to ensure that it meets safety regulations, you made the following diagram. Calculate the height. So I want the height, I'll call that x. Now it's a right angle triangle. So right away, we can name this the hypotenuse. We can name this is adjacent to 35. This is opposite to 35, right? And we can write down SOHCAHTOA because it's a right angle triangle and it deals with an angle, okay? So now in this case, I want to know opposite and I know adjacent. So opposite adjacent is TOA. So that means tan 35 is equal to opposite over adjacent, right? Now I just need to do tan 35 on my calculator, and we get 0.7 is x over 35, right? So the last thing I need to do is cross multiply and say that x is 0.7 times 35. So x is 0.7 times 35, 24.5. And in this case, that would be meters because that's meters. Okay, so that's how the last one works. So that's it. Hopefully you've got all your corrections made. And that's it.